Hello, hello. Welcome back. I noticed this week that 2016 is trending and I love it. 2016 was a pivotal year for my family. And so I want to take you through how we changed from our scarcity mindset and how we were stuck where we were. We were really stuck in that victim mode and into the abundant life that we live now. Hey, if you're new here, my name's Kristyn. I'm an authorized infinite banking practitioner, and I help Canadian families and business owners find peace in their financial lives and live the abundant lives that they were born to live by taking control back over their finances and redirecting more money back into their pockets. So, I was thinking about 2016, and it really got me thinking. I realized that, wow, it's been 10 years since we moved into the house that we're in now, and since we really made this shift in our not just financial life, but in our lives altogether. So, in order to understand kind of where we were coming from, let's back up to 2015. So we got married young. We moved into a two-bedroom bungalow. It was like one bedroom downstairs and a loft that was big and open, but really short ceiling. So it really wasn't ideal even for a bedroom. We tried to sell it multiple times, but we owed more money on it than it was worth after the real estate market tanked in the early 2000s. So we had tried to sell this property for a really long time and we couldn't get out of it. We were stuck with three kids in this little house. And to be honest, the size of the house wasn't as much of an issue as the area that we were in. We had a lot of low income rentals around us, and there was a lot of drugs and alcohol and a lot of things that were literally right outside of our windows. So it wasn't an area that we felt safe in anymore. In 2015, we took a leap of faith and we rented out that property. We found someone that was vetted. Looking back, there was red flags, but he was vetted by his employer, who was also a neighbor and someone that we bought our dream house, which was a century-old farmhouse in need of lots of repairs, but we bought it for very cheap. We did a 6-week blitz while we lived at my parents' house, and we gutted the entire main level. We kind of spruced up the upstairs, but the main level, we gutted right down to the studs. And so when we redid the main level, we had done what was called like a purchase plus improvements mortgage. And so we had about $20,000 that we could play with, and we had to show the bank that we had increased the value by at least that much when it was finished. So we had 6 weeks to complete this. Within those 6 weeks, we redid all of the drywall on the main level. We cleaned up the floors. They were hardwood floors, so we sanded and redid them. Completely redid the kitchen. So we did an IKEA kitchen, installed it ourselves. We added a second bathroom, basically cut our bathroom into half and made it into two separate rooms. We also bought a new furnace, air conditioner, and water tank. All of this for less than $20,000. Now, granted, this was 10 years ago. We got a lot more bang for our buck then, but also all of our labor was free. We did the majority of the labor. Thank you to all the friends and family that helped us get everything together for this house. There was a lot of people. My mom, my dad were here every single weekend helping us get this house done so we could move in. So fast forward, we moved in a week before Christmas, and then let's go into 2016. So we were elated to be in this house that we had dreamt of for so many years. It was like a dream come true. We're smack dab in the middle of farmland. We're in between two towns. We have a community trail that is kind of behind our property. And so we have like private access to get onto that trail. And it's just fantastic. So we were elated to be here. We were so excited. And we never lost track of that thankfulness, that feeling that we had of just being so, so grateful for where we were because we had suffered for so long in this other house that we were in. And so while this was going on and we were so happy to be in this house and our mortgage was refinanced and we had proved that we had increased the equity by so much more than we had paid into it, we had this storm brewing over at the rental. So when I said there was some red flags, one of them that came up was that this man that we had rented to, his girlfriend moved in immediately and they started fighting over the possession of that home. And so they stopped paying rent. At first, we thought, okay, well, at least they're paying the bills. They kind of went a little AWOL, but at least they're paying the utilities. The lights are on. We know that somebody's at least there, taking care of things, and we don't have to worry about burst pipes or those kind of things. It wasn't until they were about 2 months past due and we hadn't heard anything from them that we went and looked in the mailbox. And there was a whole pile of utility bills that had been switched back into my name. Now, we didn't even know that that was a thing that could happen, but these tenants had switched all of the electricity, all of the gas, everything back into our names, and now we had all of these late bills that were piling up, and we couldn't just turn everything off. It was wintertime, and so we're owing thousands of dollars in bills on top of not getting rent, on top of, living on basically one income at this point. And to say that it was a stressful time would be such an understatement. We had never even rented ourselves, so we didn't know what the landscape looked like, what your rights were as a landlord, all those kind of things. So there's a lot of research, a lot of learning, really steep learning curve as to tenants' rights and versus landlord rights and all of those things. And so by the time we got into the court system to be able to actually evict these people legally, they were months and months behind in rent. We owed thousands of dollars in utility bills. Then on top of that, so even after this court date, we got a settlement. I still have a piece of paper showing that this tenant owes us so many thousands of dollars for all of the back rent and all of these things. When we finally got possession of the house, it was completely destroyed. There was a turkey that had been left in the fridge, and the fridge had been turned off, and the smell, the stench coming from the house was absolutely insane. There was at least one dog that they had locked in the basement, and so there was, feces and things everywhere. And so we basically had to have a cleaning team come in with hazmat suits and clean the house top to bottom. We had more expenses just bringing everything back up to livable condition so that we could rent it out again, because at this point, the market still hadn't turned and we were still kind of bottoms up on this mortgage. So eventually we found a better tenant and sold that house a couple years later. But the thing that I want to come back to, so why this was such a pivotal year for us, because we could easily look at this as, oh my gosh, look at all the things that happened to us. We thought this was going to be such a great year and it turned so terrible. And instead, we never lost sight of being grateful for where we were. Every month, we relied so heavily on prayers for those months. At the time, didn't know how we were making it through. Somehow, every month, we got the bills paid on both houses and we kept going. The pivotal part was the shift in our mindset. So we really changed from thinking about poor us, we're in this terrible situation, to, you know what? That was our decision. We made a poor decision putting that person in the house. There were red flags. That's on us. That was our responsibility. And we took responsibility for it. And so keeping that gratefulness alive really kept us focused on not just where we were, but where we wanted to go. So we were able to keep, a clear vision of where we wanted to go. And this was just a bump in the road. So that was a huge turning point for us, just changing the way that we were thinking about money and the way that we were thinking that, oh, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't afford this, will me. So two things really got us through that year. I mentioned that the first one, of course, was prayer. The second one, and I didn't realize this until looking back into it in hindsight, was that we had access to capital. That made all the difference. So remember I said that we bought this house cheap. We paid very little for it. We got a purchase and improvement loan. We did all these renovations. The thing is, we basically doubled the value in that house. So the equity in that house and having access to that equity through a home equity line of credit was exactly what got us through and able to pay for the renovations in the other house and able to pay for that mortgage when we didn't have the cash coming in from rental income at that point. So we didn't know it at the time, but we were actually practicing infinite banking way before we had even heard the term. What we were doing was putting most of our income right onto the line of credit. And then we would use the line of credit to pay for all the bills and pay for those renovations and all those big things that we needed to. We slowly paid back the home equity line of credit every week when we got paid. And then as we did more renovations, the equity in our home increased and we had access to more of that equity through the line of credit and so on. So it just kind of snowballed. And so the more we focused on making our own home better, the more equity we had in it and the more access to capital we had. So later on, and I'm talking, it was at least 5 years later when I first heard the term of the infinite banking concept. And when I really looked into it, I understood it right away because we had already been doing it. I already understood the idea of moving cash and flowing cash through an asset that you own and control. Obviously, using a home equity line of credit isn't ideal because the bank still has control over it and all those things. But I understood the concept back then. And so when I really started looking into how the concept works and how we use specially designed whole life insurance, first I thought it was illegal. I thought that there can't possibly be a product out there that does what it says it's going to do. There's no way. It's got to be too good to be true. And the more I looked into it, the more I realized, no, that's actually been there all along. That's what the really wealthy people do to protect their money, to keep it growing tax free and to keep it accessible to them so they can reinvest it in other things. And then I was so angry that I had gone my whole life without knowing this. I talked to literally everyone I knew. That was the only conversation I would have with anyone was, had you heard about infinite banking? Do you know what this is? Do you know what whole life insurance is? Do you know how it works? And not one other person understood that it could be used in this way. Even if they had heard of whole life insurance, which a lot of people hadn't, they had no idea that we could use it in this way to benefit you while you're alive. So I was so angry. And then it took me a while to find an advisor that I could trust. And so that's ultimately what led me to getting my license and becoming an advisor myself, because I knew that there was a lot of other people out there like me that hadn't heard of this and that are looking for ways to be more sovereign, more autonomous in their financial lives. So going back to 2016 and that pivotal time for us where we shifted from that victim mentality, the scarcity mentality, into the abundant mentality. Until then, all we could think about was what we couldn't afford. All of my conversations with friends were about how expensive this is, how much, oh, I got this bill in the mail, it's this much money. I don't know how we're gonna pay it. Oh, how can we possibly buy groceries? Oh, I wish I could buy that kind of groceries because I just can't afford that. I can't afford to buy too many fruits and vegetables. And we just had such a mindset that was so revolved around money. It drives me insane now to see it in other people because I can see it so clearly now how much we held ourselves back in that time. We had a mentality of, I can't do it. I will never be able to do it. That is something that's completely out of reach. At that point, I lived in a world of lack. I was constantly just consumed by fears that we couldn't afford something, that something was going to happen, that an emergency, a flat tire, anything was enough to throw us completely off track. Maybe you've been there when you're grocery shopping and you are keeping a running total in your head because you can't go over a certain number. And then even then you go up to the till and you go to ring through your groceries and you're praying that that debit card isn't declined. I still remember that. Every time I shop, I no longer keep that running total, but I still remember and I'm thankful every time I buy groceries, every time I go into Walmart or Canadian Tire to go buy something, that I don't have to check my bank account before I do that. And it's been a long time that I've been in this position, but I still keep that feeling of gratitude just in my consciousness and in my heart. So now, when we got into this new home, it was something that we had dreamt of for so long that we were living this life that was bigger than we even dreamed. The house was better than any house that we had ever dreamed. It was better than any other home that we looked at over the last several years when we were shopping for a new home. It was everything that we wanted and then some. And so going back to that level of thankfulness, one of the first things that we did in our house, I mentioned that we redid the kitchen. One of the first things that we did was we painted a great big chalkboard across a whole wall of the kitchen. And we framed it and we put it in chalkboard paint and we made that our grateful board. And so everyone who comes into our house has to write something on that grateful board. We do it all the time. We add little things. Sometimes it's just funny jokes. Sometimes it's just a word or two. Sometimes it's something simple as just hot coffee. But it's a reminder not just to practice it when you're writing on it, but then it's a reminder all year long when we're looking at this board and we're seeing all the things on it. And you notice right away when someone came in and put something new, and it makes us smile and it makes us grateful every morning as we're making our coffee. And literally every time that we go into the kitchen, we see this. And it's just so nice. I love this tradition. Every January, we reset it. So we take a picture, we frame the picture up on the wall, then we reset the board. So we repaint it with more chalkboard paint. One day it's going to be, this thick out of the wall. So 10 years in, we've done this 10 times now. And yeah, it's one of my favorite New Year's traditions. So when we're practicing this daily gratitude and we're always reminding ourselves of the things that we are grateful for and for how far we've come, we start busting through these ceilings that we put on ourselves. So for us, getting out of that little house that we felt stuck in, that we felt like we were going to be there forever, that shattered a ceiling for us being out in the another glass ceiling that really made me realize how much I had been limiting myself my whole life was when the following summer, so in 2017, we learned to sail. Now, when I was a kid, my parents used to take us out for ice cream after church, and we would get ice cream and we would walk along the harbor and we would look at all of the rich people's sailboats. And I just remember being in such awe of these boats. I would hear like the clinking on the masts, and I just thought that they were the most like majestic things and so out of reach. I was completely in awe of them, and it was in awe in the same way that a child might think of an astronaut going into space. That's something that is so out there, so far away that I don't know if that's even possible for me. So far away that they don't even think that it's in the realm of possibilities for them. Not just that I could never do that, they just don't even have the thought process to think that I can't even do that because it's so far out there. So for me, learning to sail was one of those things. I had limited myself that only rich people had sailboats. I didn't know anyone that sailed. I didn't know anyone that had a boat for that matter. That was just completely outside of my realm of possibilities. It never occurred to me that I could learn to do. And so my husband and I decided to take up sailing. We spent that whole summer learning how to sail. And then by the end of the summer, we actually bought our own sailboat. And that was another glass ceiling. The funny thing is, it wasn't even that expensive. It was the mentality that it was going to be too expensive that we didn't even bother to look. Never occurred to us to price out a sailboat because that's just something for rich people. That's not for us. And so we bought a vintage sailboat. She was built in the 70s, nothing fancy. It's basically a floating camper, but she's ours and she sails and it gets us out on the water and we get to enjoy this lifestyle that we never thought was even possible. And so we named her Providence because that's exactly what the boat represented for us, was just God's providence in the way that he makes things work out for you when you trust him completely. So if there is one thing that I want you to get away from this message today, whether you are completely in debt and you're living paycheck to paycheck, or you're making multi-millions in a year in income, I want you to think about how grateful you are for where you are. I want you to think about what your dreams are. Don't give yourself a ceiling. Dream big. How many more people do you want to help? How much more impact do you want to have on this world? Not just financially, but in terms of ideas and things that you are generating to help other people. I really want you to think outside the box and to start dreaming about how big you could make this. So let me know in the comments, what glass ceilings have you set for yourself that maybe you've pushed through, maybe you haven't. Maybe today is the day that's going to be your turning point, that you're going to start looking towards a better future and how you can get to that next goal. Thanks so much for joining. If you found today's episode helpful, give it a like, hit subscribe. And when you're ready to take the next steps towards infinite banking, click the link in the description to access my free resources and book a call to start. Your future self will thank you. Until next time, live free.